We should be live on YouTube. Now let's see if we can get live on Facebook. And we got all sorts of... All right, finally, we are live on YouTube and Facebook. It took a while, buffering internet connections. Who knows these days? We're always dependent on some technology, right?
Technology is what we're talking about today.
That's right. It's a good introduction. It's already August the 5th.
The 5th.
Wednesday. Time flies. We have a face here you've seen before, a special guest, Mitch Booth. He's the owner of Love Whole Foods. We have a great location here in Ormond Beach, but also in Port Orange. He is a relentless health advocate in this community and a great lecturer on health and nutrition. And today we want to talk about COVID-20, the battle for health, freedom, and your well-being. So welcome again, Mitch, on our podcast today.
Hey, how you doing, Dr. Mike?
I'm always doing well. So let's talk a little bit about this. And I think the best way to start is ask you, who in our government wants to preserve our First Amendment rights? In other words, who is controlling that media? And the media is always trying, or always has a great appetite, I would say, for data mining, and then basically, filtering that data and information to basically meet a private corporate agenda. So can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, agendas are what this is all about. I wrote, just for those that are followers of Love Whole Foods, I've been writing an article. My background was journalism before I became a entrepreneur in the wonderful world of alternative healing.
And so the journalism is benefiting you still.
So, and it has. I wrote an article called Preventing HA Disease, and HA was hidden agenda. And everyone listening here has been so subsumed with making sure that they don't get this virus that a lot of things are happening in Congress besides writing blank checks to people to overcome the economic hardships of COVID. That's fine. But for the viewers out there, on July 28th, Congress did something unprecedented. They dragged in Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, Tim Cook. And for those of you that don't know, he's the CEO of Apple. He took over from the tragic loss of Steve Jobs. And then somebody that nobody knows his name is Sundar Pichai. And he's probably the most important of the group. Sundar is the CEO of Google. And for all of you out there, there ain't one of you that's got one of these puppies that doesn't know what Google is. The question is, if I can be blunt, who the frack is Google? Other than that, there are a lot of techno weenies that are really, really smart with computers and they created a search platform that is without a doubt the number one search platform.
Sure. Yes.
But there aren't little, fairies, pixies in some Ethernet. These are people that are paid incredible amounts of money because we've given them, that's you and me and everybody else that has a smartphone or a laptop, we've given them incredible amounts of power. Unprecedented in the sense that never in the history of the United States has a group that I mentioned, these four men, have so much power that has no accountability to government regulatory oversight. And even though I'm certainly a free market enterprise capitalist, in the sense that I really believe that hard work and honest business practices, which we've done for 30 years, pays off in the marketplace to be able to do what? Survive for 30 years.
Yeah.
But now we're dealing with a situation where so much power has been concentrated that we need to be concerned. And the concern is that First Amendment, that first amendment to our Constitution, which is freedom of expression. And so everyone is saying, well, what, aren't you like a nutritionist and an educator? What do you care? Well, I care because for 30 years, we've been giving out information like in your book. Give me your book. This is not the book that is referred to when you go to the Mayo Clinic. This is a book that summarizes information that has been given down through, in some cases, millennia, to be able to do the basics, which is, how do we prevent disease? And how do we do that without subscribing to only one system of healing? And of course, what we're going to talk about this afternoon is the dominant system of healing in the United States is pharmaceutical. It's taking chemicals to address whatever the disease is, as opposed to your book, which is talking about either orthomolecular healing, which is simple, basic nutrition.
Sure.
How do we get enough vitamin D3 to do what? What has been well documented now in the medical literature across this pandemic, that vitamin D3 is what weaponizes us to make sure that we don't become a hotel for the coronavirus to set up shop. It's real simple, orthomolecular. Then there are phytobotanicals, which is what your book is a hybrid and what we've been doing.
Yeah.
So you can take Xanax, which now with the stress that the American population's gone through, Xanax is off the chart. And Xanax isn't the only one, although I want to point out to all the ladies out there, the number one drug prescribed by an OBGYN is not vitamin D3 for bone building for menopausal females, critical, along with some K2, by the way. We've been talking about that synergy for 30 years.
Sure, we need to be able to absorb it.
Right. But even 30 years ago, when we were suggesting 2,000 IUs of vitamin D3, I got threatening phone calls. No, I mean, no, that was somehow dangerous. But the point that the number one drug prescribed by an OBGYN is a psychoanalytic and anxiolytic called Xanax, where what we would do is talk about things like St. John's wort or something, and certainly other tools that isn't the subject of what we're doing today. But this fascination now with, or more important, this that we're all in limbo waiting for the pharmaceutical industry to come up with a vaccine that's going to be the cavalry charging in, and we're all going to go back to, it'll be like what the life was 6 months ago.
Yeah.
I just need to tell everybody out there, we live in Florida, but please it's not really a good health strategy to live in Disneyland. It's not going to happen. And then, of course, when the government decided to name the development of the vaccine the Warp Speed Project, it didn't inspire
nobody.
It didn't inspire any confidence. But understand, well, or let's backtrack just for a second. So why am I here not promoting, like we did the last time with Terry Limrod, one of the greatest healers, certainly one of the most brilliant phytobotanical masters in the in the healthcare system in the United States. Lives in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Great program. You can go to lovewholefoods.com if you missed that podcast. So why did I call Mike and say, what do we need to do here? Or what do you want to do? I called and said, listen, I don't want to promote a product. I want people to think. I'm an ex-journalist. I worked for the Hartford Courant in a previous life, before my wife and I moved to Florida to start Love Whole Foods. I had already had a career in print journalism, and of which I was really proud. The reason I gave you a call was that last week in the News Journal, there was an article that was written by a USA Today contributor. USA Today contributor, not a staff member of USA Today. It was a contributor. His name is Imran Ahmed. And he runs a website called the Center for Countering Digital Hate.
Okay.
So he's got a deal with a name like Ahmed. I can only assume that there are a lot of people that don't like Muslims, and so his shtick is that he wants to make sure that anti-Semitism, anti-Islam websites are monitored. For some reason, I mean, that's the name of his operation, the Center for Countering Digital Hate. For some reason, he decided to create the USA Today decided to pick up an article that he wrote complaining about the billion-dollar natural food industry that is responsible for promoting the anti-vaxxer agenda, and that Americans are being hoodwinked into the dangerous propaganda being perpetrated on what? On social media platforms.
Yeah.
And we're talking Twitter, YouTube, we're doing YouTube here.
Yeah, YouTube, Facebook.
But let's go. And who are these perpetrators, right? So we mentioned a Californian named David Avocado Wolf. Wolf is not a medical doctor, but his Facebook distributes a health advice to more than 12 million followers. Guys, 12 million followers, right? Remember that freedom of speech thing? You can babble anything, right? You can even do Ku Klux Klan stuff.
Anything you want.
Anti-Nazi stuff, where our friends in Europe are seeing a revival, even in Germany, of the National Socialism, right?
Yeah.
Right, it's there. We won't even talk about pornography. That's all there. But suddenly we got some guy who's not even a journalist, right? Who writes something, right? And the USA Today picks it up. And he wants to tell us that those 12 million followers they're being brainwashed by a guy named Avocado, right? and of course, he's making it's not just David Wolf. Right here in Ormond Beach, we have Dr. Joseph Mercola, right? And the bottom line is that he's done some number crunching, and you want to know how much they generated in their sales of their quacker, of their
snake oils,
of their colloidal silver.
Yeah.
Right. And when he goes and says that old Avocado Wolf is saying, colloidal silver is number one, right? $1 billion. Folks, you want to know how much the pharmaceutical industry made in 2018? That's before COVID came to town.
340 or 50?
300, well, I'd say, you know, it depends on how you count it.
300 some billion.
350 billion. And this guy is talking about
1 billion, all of us.
The whole thing, right?
Yeah.
It makes me want to be able to do what we're doing right now, is to do critical thinking. Because when I grew up, that's when you went to a university, that's when you went there, right? High school was like, you know, everybody watched Good Times at Ridgemont High. Okay, that was fine. When you went to college, there were actually intelligent people that taught you skills called critical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
You know, $1 billion. Folks, I don't need to tell you, if you're talking to Bezos, right, his valet budget's probably a couple of mil,
Yeah.
right? When Dr. Seneff gave her talk talking about Monsanto well, let's look at the most recent court cases in California on Roundup.
Yeah.
You know, the reason why the punitive damage award by peers, critical thinking people listened to the data, understood clearly that Bayer knew that their product caused cancer.
Yeah.
They weren't going to sue them for a couple $100 million. That's what their golf budget is, right?
Well,
it was
always
1.2 billion. And the reason is that in our legal system, and you know, I have sort of a love-hate relationship with the legal profession. But when you have entities with that much power, how much power did Bayer exercise when they bought Monsanto's pig in a poke?
Yeah.
60 billion. That's 60, folks. 60. And that was just for Monsanto. I mean, we're not talking about
all the others.
Everything else that people need to understand, that Bayer now is the largest genetic engineering entity on the surface of the planet. But the 60 billion alone tells you that when you read stuff like this, you need to be looking behind the curtain.
Yeah.
Right? I know David Avocado Wolf. I've attended seminars with him. He has an IQ of about $140 compared to when I listened to the Sundar Pichai, and I can't even pronounce his name, from Google, it certainly didn't impress me, other than we'll get back to you. I can't answer that uncomfortable question, like why Google should be able to have the ability to do what? Tell Mercola that his website's not welcome.
Yeah.
Right? Or if the platform doesn't remove it, it puts them, as everybody knows, as they go and they say, well, I want to know what the best air fryer I can get, right?
Sure.
So you get the air fryer. Everybody knows air fryer. That's the hottest thing, right? So you think it's an accident that the one that came up first got there, you know, because it happened to be the best air fryer? It got there because whoever it was that
Sure.
had that paid the most money. You know, everybody thinks that this stuff is somehow governed by God. Give me a break. So it isn't just Mercola that's been taken. They bury him so that you can't get to what you and I would call complementary medicine, right? If I go and I Google, let me ear infections. Let me give you a good example, because my granddaughter just got a swimmer's ear. You know that you swim, right? Ear
She's
infection.
still rowing?
Pardon?
She's still
No,
rowing?
the other
one.
this one's surfing, right? Spending the whole day, and it's summertime, and you don't get COVID swimming in the ocean. You just get chomped by sharks. So you do ear infection. So what comes up on our magic box, right? And you would say, well, gee, since there are no antibiotics for ear infections, Otis media is a bacteria that has evolved so that it is a superbug. right? And so you would say, well, that would make sense. So there has to be something. And of course, you and I know that there are really peculiar things like garlic oil, mullein oil, right? Do those come? And by the way, we've been doing this for 30 years. Do I know that it works? Yeah, because the mother comes in and says, you got to do something. The kid can't sleep because the ear is inflamed, right? And then, of course, we won't even talk about colloidal silver, but, only because Ahmed here tells me that somehow, or Ahmed, I'm sorry, I don't want to be belligerent. Ahmed says that this is all hocus pocus. Well, wait a minute. Not only did I get taught about critical thinking in college, I was also taught sort of fundamentals of economics. And that is, dumb schmoes don't put their money on the table, right? If the product doesn't work. Yeah. It's just really simple. If you build a lousy car like a Yugo, you know what happens to that car company?
Goes down.
Most people out there don't even, it's a joke. Most people don't know. It was a nice Russian car, by the way. You want to know what communism produced? Go out and try and find a Yugo. I'm sure that there's a collector's market for it, right? Yeah. It got deep six because it didn't work.
Not just only that, but people like that, they don't even do their research, because even everybody says PubMed. Okay, then go look at vitamin D3, go look at vitamin C, go look at colloidal silver, and you find thousands and thousands of peer-reviewed studies published worldwide on all of those for over hundreds and hundreds of years. And if you then look at a drug, you find just a few. And those few studies are done by the beneficiary, the big pharma.
Let's go back to colloidal silver. So I went on my phone. I want everybody to go on the phone. You click it on, and it's got this little neat microphone. It's a really nice feature. And you say, colloidal silver, PubMed. PubMed. You know what that is. And hopefully I won't waste time. Well, that's interesting, because PubMed is the first thing that came up. Right? The antibacterial activity of colloidal silver against gram-negative infections. Ear infections are gram-negative infections, right? Yeah. In PubMed. But Ahmed didn't do that, right?
Exactly.
But and what's the tragedy that I get here is, when I was at the Hartford Courant, we had what were called editors. And their job was to say...
to be critical before it gets published.
Right. Do you have, what are your sources? Of course, this was all before we had computers, but we didn't have laptop computers, right? What are your sources? What are your confirmation on this, right? And if you didn't have them, right, and usually you needed 3 sources. You didn't have one guy, because the one guy could have an axe to grind, right? But the point of this being that now we have to have on channel 13 on Spectrum, right? A fact checker. When did that happen?
What happened to journalism, right?
What I'm saying is, right, and journalism is information. And the reason that obviously I'm upset and I'm concerned is that who controls the information controls our health destinies. If you go on here and you don't find that every Shriners burn ward in the United States uses Silvadene cream. Folks, it's called Silvadene cream. What do you think's in it? Colloidal silver. Oh, yeah. The Chinese, by the way, use it as the first line of treatment in all of their in any open wound weeping dermatological
But condition. People don't realize every drug, has its origin in a plant or a herb or something natural. They know from thousands of years ago what certain plants and herbs do, but you can't take any patent on something that's natural or from Mother Nature. So what does a big farm company do? They study the plant, they study the herb, they're trying to find out which is the active component of that plant or herb or whatever it may be. Then when they isolate it, they're going to try to make a fake copy, a synthetic copy of it. Now they can patent something. So it all starts with Mother Nature anyway. So how can you even be against Mother Nature or say it's hocus pocus if even every drug is just basically a fake, cheap, synthetic copy of Mother Nature? And anybody can try to fight me on that, but we can deduct any drug back to Mother Nature. It's that simple.
So let's go back to my granddaughter's ear infection.
Yeah.
So we know that garlic oil is very easily adaptable to penetrate the biofilm that the Otis media makes for itself to protect itself, because it wants to replicate just like the COVID.
Encapsulate and replicate.
And encapsulate and replicate. But we know that garlic has the ability to be able to penetrate that outer shell and reach the RNA DNA of the bacteria because it's alive. Yeah. And what does it do? It rips the RNA DNA apart. But here's another insight. Let's talk about those. There's one group of pharmaceuticals that we as the United States could be really proud of, and that was that we created the first antibiotics. Most of the people out there don't realize that antibiotics were introduced into the human biome, the human gut, on June 6, 1944. You know, I've talked to gastroenterologists that don't know that. And what happened on June 6th? We invaded France to overthrow the worst. It wasn't just authoritarian, fascist regime that enabled us to have the freedoms that we're having here and the ability to be able to talk. I just had lunch with my best friend, Vano, who was born in Italy during World War II. His stories on fascism are fascinating. What was the first thing that Mussolini did in his rise to power? He took over the newspapers and controlled the information, the media. Yeah. And then of course, what was the message that was authorized by the fascist dictator, and which one wasn't? Well, it all had to march to the tune of what made Mussolini and his cronies more entrenched in power. And what did you do to anybody that didn't march their political line? Well, we're talking the Dark Ages. So you had guys called black shirts. You had the thugs that came and beat you up. If you got the message the first time, you didn't write any more articles. Yeah. If you kept writing them, then worse things happened, then you're getting beaten up. Why am I mentioning this? Because the authoritarianism or autocracy is alive and well today. We're watching it as we see in the case of Putin. He just voted himself to a lifetime position. That's interesting. Is that the principle of what this country is based on? Nope. I'm not going there. But let's go back to our antibiotics. Again, as a student of history, most people don't realize that more soldiers died in the Pacific from malaria than from bullets. But more important, the reason why the barbarians were defeated in Europe, that we took back the European continent, was that those horrible barbarians, and they were, I mean, you come from a country that in your...
We were a battlefield.
But when you talk about the horror story, these were not nice people, right? But the difference between the soldiers that got wounded on our side, we had antibiotics. And that soldier, if it wasn't serious, survived to go back and fight. The barbarians got sepsis. They lost their arm. And what happens to a one-armed Nazi? Usually losing his right arm. He's usually a dead Nazi. Yeah. And I can only say that it's really important because all of that autocratic principles are alive and well today. It's astounding to me. But it goes back to that First Amendment. As soon as something happens where you've got Google, the phone manufacturer that everybody has, which is Apple, and then of course arguments where Apple says, well, I'm not giving you the information, even though the terrorists was using an Apple phone
Yeah.
to set up a terrible event like 9/11. That's another issue. But I'm talking how it is that the Congress interviewed these men with a clear understanding that they have power that needs to be at least reviewed or an oversight to make sure that an agenda that is good for Jeff Bezos, he's already disrupted the entire retail fabric of the United States.
Yeah.
You know, and God bless him. You know, for all you people out there that you need an air fryer, and by the way, the first 10 air fryers that you're going to see were all made in China.
Mm-hmm.
Not only did he destroy an American incentive to make an air fryer, but he's indirectly supported the agenda of the Communist Party of China. And everyone's going to laugh. Well, Mitch, you're just, you know, you had too much coffee. You know,
You're going down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, you worry too much about this and you worry too much about that. Folks, remember we talked about that 340 billion, 350 billion pharmaceutical industry? Where do you think the drugs are made?
China.
They're made in China, baby.
The majority, yeah.
The
Vast majority.
The vast majority of them. But here's the other insight. We consume more pharmaceutical drugs than any other country.
The WHO says that we consume as Americans every year between 50 and 70% of all the drugs produced on the planet, and we swallow more than 80% of all the painkillers.
And that's funny, you took it right away from me. that we consume almost all of the opiates, and they're made in China. By the way, of course, because boomers have the attention span of basically gerbils, where is the opium processing capital of the world? It's China. Remember all those opium dens and all those Charlie Chan movies from the 30s where everything's dark and smoky and there's like this basement? Those are all the opium dens. You know what the penalty in China for being caught abusing opiates? You are sent to basically a gulag.
Yeah.
And usually you aren't seen again.
Yeah.
They have a real interesting way to control their drug problem. If you get caught, you become one of the invisible, one of the disappeared, right? Interesting. And what is the other point that I'm trying to make? Before COVID came to the scene, does anybody know about Purdue Pharma? Does anybody think about all those poor schmoes, the mom and dad and grandma and grandpa that were handed the oxycodone like candy? I just have to tell you that if you think that you're having stress with this COVID virus, imagine the people that were on the opiates and now, because we're such a...
And obviously it's an interesting story because, I mean, it got FDA approved. The studies clearly show the addictive effect, but they left it out and left it out of their marketing materials. They didn't tell the doctors about it. And so finally, it obviously became obvious it's very addictive. And then they get a slap on the wrist and have to pay a few $1 million of a fine. But these companies, all they calculate that in, it's nothing. It's like me popping up $20 out of my pocket. It's not going to affect me at all. And so those fines are way too little, and they basically calculate it in anyways. And even after they lost in court, they pay the fines. Why are we still able to get it? It's supposedly better controlled, but it's still out there, and there's hundreds of alternatives. Well, and
there's a worse story involving that. Everyone listening to this broadcast knows about hydrochloroquine.
Yeah, sure.
Remember what I said about the Pacific Theater of World War II?
Yeah, more died of malaria.
What's the most powerful anti-malarial drug ever created by the hands of man?
HCQ.
And so here's another example of where I really wonder what's the agenda, right? So I'm not going to get into a political discussion about Trump, but he has the audacity of telling the American people that he's taking HCQ.
Yeah.
Right. He didn't bother to tell him that he was doing HCQ with zinc
In the Z-Pack, probably, yeah.
in a Z-Pack form. But the heart of the issue is HCQ has been on the drug formulary for over 70 years.
Yes.
So suddenly we hear this agenda, this huge, oh my God, you know, the HCQ, you got to be an idiot to take HCQ, and that it's going to cause all these heart problems.
And the ones that saying it on many other other drugs,
or they're absolutely on a crusade that we can't do anything. Oh my God, you just have to hang in there, baby, until the vaccine
comes out.
Although
it is pretty funny though, right? I mean, did you see that 2005 study on HCQ where Fauci was involved with the study? And basically the summary was that HCQ may be not only a treatment for coronaviruses, but also a preventative.
Other corona.
Yes,
everybody needs to know that COVID-19 is not the first coronavirus.
They've been studying, or they've been trying to get even a vaccine for over 2 decades now for the general coronavirus.
Right, which to our listeners is the seasonal flu.
Yes, but they obviously haven't found one. And when it comes to the research on that, they one phase is the animal studies, right? And for this coronavirus, they mostly use ferrets. And what they found is that with animals, what they can't do with humans, they actually can inject them with the virus after the vaccination. And what happens is their antibodies attack their own immune system and the ferrets die. And so what they want to do now is speed up this COVID vaccine and skip the animal studies, because they already know that's going to be a huge problem where the antibodies would fight the body. So this vaccine, in my opinion, based on their studies, not my studies, could be very, very dangerous, especially skipping those animal studies where all the ferrets die. I guess humans won't die, ferrets will die. I don't know. I'm not going to get it.
Right. And I can only say that we've been open 7 days a week for 4.5 months, 65 employees. We're handing out vitamin D3 and vitamin C.
Echinacea, endographis.
We're working with our employees. We haven't had a single case. I mean, and knock on wood. But also, everyone's wearing gloves and masks. We don't need to do it here because I just got my test back, and just.
Well, I don't have to worry because this strong immune system here, that COVID virus won't survive 2 seconds.
Right, but let's go back to the HCQ again.
Mm-hmm.
What I didn't understand was this incredible explosion of, oh my God, you're going to get heart disease. Well, wait a minute. What about the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Pacific War soldiers that took HCQ?
For malaria.
Right? For malaria. Either they
How many died of a heart attack?
And I'm sure some of them did.
Yeah.
But the point is that if it was like Premarin, where so many women developed breast cancer that they virtually took the drug off the market because even the FDA was saying, I don't care what the research you provided. All we know is all these women were taking
breast cancer and strokes.
And I mean, obviously, but suddenly the point of the conversation to hear is, what's the agenda going on?
Exactly.
And if you Google ionospore and understand that the way that HCQ kills this scourge, malaria has killed more human beings than any other single disease, right? And here it is, it having particularly positive effect with maybe some complications, because every drug has complications. Leg cramps is a big problem, right? With any quinine concoction.
But I know what you're saying. The side effects or adverse reactions are not worse or more than any other drug that anybody is taking. So why pull it out of context?
Right. But why aren't we being told that, first of all, it's a drug that in the formulary has been around, we have a PhD pharmacist in the family. Well, long before COVID, he had dozens of customers that were on HCQ. Nobody even thought twice about it, especially with the advent of autoimmune diseases,
Sure.
like lupus. And so one of the other tragedies of this is that instead of ramping up the production on a drug that would cost nothing because there are no patents, there's nobody that needs to be paid off, the drug has dried up. So the people that are suffering from rheumatoid arthritis and lupus and a number of other aren't even able to get the drug.
It now. Yeah.
I mean, there's another side, dark side aspect of what's been going on. But the point of our discussion today is
Critical thinking.
Critical thinking and making sure that the digital world that we live in and is not going to go away, that we have the health freedom to be able to say, like you just talked about with a vaccine where they've skipped the medical trials. I mean, the animal trials. You know, I'm not sure I'm real comfortable with that.
No, of course
right?
not.
I wrote this article. It was called "The Need for Medical Consent" to be what has been the foundation of our medical system is informed consent. That if I'm going to do a drug, you need to inform me, oh yeah, that Premarin long term, you know, you have to really be aware that if you smoke and do Premarin, you've just tripled and quadrupled your risks for
a multitude of diseases.
There's a lot of them. But the key is that if you inform them and the woman says, I don't care, I just want to make sure that
then you're good. Yeah.
That the hot flash, I mean, without a doubt, the number one most powerful tool to prevent a female menopausal hot flash is Premarin.
Right? I know, but
they're
hiding those things from us, so they don't show up in the consent. I mean, look back at your oxycodone, right? It didn't say it was addictive on the consent forms.
Or that the original research was done to do oxy in very brief.
Short term.
You're very short term. You had a traumatic accident, and you're in a whole lot of pain, and you take it for a week, and then the idea is that you
get it to something else, like a Tylenol.
And you tighter down, you do something, use bare aspirin or whatever it is that you needed. My concern is that we now have a Congress that understands that the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, just like in television, needs to be stepping up to the plate and doing what we did understand that there was no television before 1950, right? Most of the listeners don't know that the FCC came in and passed what was called a Courtesy Act. And the Courtesy Act said that if you do a program on the Democrats, then you have an obligation to do, or let's say it's the evening news, if you're doing the convention for the Democrats, as a courtesy, you would do an equal amount
for the Republicans.
And the word was to be objective. When was the last time in journalism school they used the term, well, we're going to do a class on objectivity? It's astounding to me. To everyone that's out there, when did we create I wrote it down. When did we create a term to describe someone's occupation as an influencer? And
influencer.
like, oh yeah, well, I got my certification. I'm an influencer.
Yes.
Right? What happened? What was the other one I was doing? Well, I mentioned fact checking. When did the media become more concerned about entertainment?
Well, entertainment, fashion shows, and that stuff.
In the fashion show, and I'm not making a value judgment about Fox, but Fox has much better optics. I like that word. That's another great word. Has much better optics than MSNBC, and so. I just want you to know it's horrible. Every night I have to decide, which one do I want to be influenced by more?
Yes, they
right?
all have their agenda these days.
The Eagles, the bubble-headed beach blonde. I mean, one of my favorite songs. When did that become the standard as opposed to, well, before we sign off, one of the greatest books that I've read recently is a book called The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, which is exactly what these four men, the age of surveillance capitalism. What is all the data the word that you use data mining for? It's for influencing.
Sure.
We have this neat computer that does algorithms, and they take all of this data and they smooch it all around, right? And they tell you that if you're looking at Fox, then you follow this profile, and if you're looking at MSNBC, it's this profile, right?
Yeah.
And
they're looking for trends, of course.
And it's all about money. Well, everyone listening to this,
they sell the data.
They sell the data, baby. And you think that Bezos is making his money selling cheap Chinese air fryers?
No.
Do you think he's making his money making sure that there aren't any genetically modified organisms at Whole Foods Market? And I'm brutal, because we have the first Whole Foods Market that came to Florida, and I'm proud of that. But the standard that my wife and I established 30 years ago is exactly the same standard. We haven't changed it.
Yeah.
No antibiotics, no hidden hormones,
no GMO,
no hidden estrogens. And that includes the new research I wanted to talk to you about, what are called metalloestrogens. Guess what aluminum is?
A metalloestrogen.
It's a metalloestrogen. Why is it that women that use aluminum deodorants get cancer here in this quadrant, not this quadrant or this one? It's
Right
this
there.
one, right?
Aluminum.
It's aluminum. And of course, I'm going to have Ahmed write another article and say, well, there isn't any real definitive science. Yeah, there is. Yeah. Her name is Dr. Susan Love, who's she's 2 months younger than I am. And I'm 71. 2 months younger. So when I met her at a conference, she was charting all of who was Dr. Susan Love? She's the head of female oncology, UCLA Medical School. So we're talking a medical center that sees more boob cancer than any other cancer, right? But she's a systems gal. I mean, she's boring as hell. But like Stephanie Seneff, she just happens to have a $150 IQ, and she's got real good discipline. So she puts into the computer where all of the breast cancers that she's had, right? And it's a target. It's real simple, guys. If you go shooting, it's a circle, and it's got four quadrants, right? It ain't an accident that if it's in this breast, it's in the upper left quadrant. If it's in this breast, it's in the upper right quadrant. I mean, there are others. I'm not saying that but that's the kind of thing that is the health freedom that we need to know. And of course, at Love Whole Foods, we don't sell antiperspirants with aluminum products.
Sure not. No.
And
there's alternatives for everything: toothpaste, deodorants, cleaning products, cosmetic products. But we got to look at those.
Right. But here again, we're 4 trials in California by peers. That means you and me, guys. These were people that were picked from the community that were in a lawsuit trying to determine whether or not a product made the defendant, or I mean the plaintiff, sick, right? The defendant is Monsanto. In 4 separate trials, they all came to the same conclusion, and yet COVID virus is here. Nobody's talking about it.
No.
The GMOs are here, and what's the significance? What concerns me is that Bill Gates is the silent partner behind these 4 guys that were who does Google use to drive their platform? It's Microsoft, guys. I don't want to bust any bubbles, right? But my interest is if Gates is convinced that the only way to save the food supply is through the genetic modification of
That's
food,
been disproven so many times.
even the WHO recognizes that we don't have. Then so let's go full circle here. Let's go back to our buddies Mussolini, Hitler, Putin. Oh yeah, the guy in North Korea. And I think he's dead, so he's been taken over by Kim Jin Soon, whatever her name is. Same, the name's changed. It's exactly the same player, right? When the full circle has to do with dictators stealing the food. You think Somalia would be in the condition that they're in if indeed the donations of foodstuffs that come to the world were there or robbed in the warehouses and then sold on the black market? I mean, the stories are endless in that case. Syria, we dump all the food there, and then what's that tin horn dictator's name?
Just another one.
Just another name. I don't. The only reason why he's there is that Hitler propped him up. Just like all the other puppet governments that Hitler propped up as he conquered country by country.
Oh, what is Soros?
Right.
He's a Nazi.
But the point of this is that it is well documented that the United States throws away 30% of the food that we produce. And by the way, I only because I have friends in Jordan, I'm looking at the side effects of the
explosion.
Of the refugees that have fled Syria. They're all in Jordan, destabilizing Jordan. Have friends in Singapore. Singaporeans, which are on an island, have no problems with food supply.
Yeah.
And the reason is that they're a democracy like we are. But you look at these tin horn dictators and they have their own agenda. And the agenda is just what we're seeing with Putin. They want to destabilize the freedoms that we're talking about, the First Amendment, the ability to be able to go on YouTube and make people think about what the results of the research by Shoshana Zuboff is revealing. What's revealing is that we are creating a digital prison, and it's being driven by entities that are not elected by the populace, only because we're all thinking about what's going on.
Yeah.
And what happens when that hidden agenda based on unbelievable amount of wealth? Again, we look at Jeff Bezos alone. Even, I mentioned the Microsoft, the CEO of Bill Gates. Does Bill Gates have the right to go and donate to whatever social agenda that he wants? Sure. Mm-hmm. But when he's dictating the foreign policy of the United States, that's when we need to be able to go and say to our two U.S. senators and our state representatives, I think we ought to have another hearing here. Yeah. And if nothing else, we need to have an oversight where we say, we as a people, do we want to be able to give this kind of information? And again, we're seeing it in the news. TikTok. Well, TikTok. You've been on TikTok?
Not me. I heard of it from the kids and stuff.
The reason why the Chinese want to buy and the Chinese own TikTok. Mm-hmm. And why is it? Because they want to turn the young people's brains in America into Jell-O. Mm-hmm. By watching like stupid pet videos.
All stupid stuff, yeah.
But that's not what believe me, the Chinese are not into this for any other reason other than what Zuboff is saying, data mining. And it's being used to subvert the democracy that we have. And I'm not going to get into it. China is not a communist country. It's not. There's nobody in China that wants to tell me, like in the 60s, oh man, I got my little Mao book here. That's really cool, right? And I'm going to wear my little Mao hat with the little red star. They're not trying to do that. The Chinese have one agenda. They want it all. And
I think China is done, and it's going to be done very soon.
I think they're going to be done very soon. The whole purpose of this is that we need to ask our elected officials.
Yes.
But on December 7, 1941, there was a great book, At Dawn We Slept. And the purpose of when I read this article by whoever Ahmed is, and I'll never read, hopefully never read another one, only because.
Well, it was good. See, it sparked this conversation.
If it wasn't for this, we wouldn't be doing this. But what we want to do is be able to understand that it's our community built on the representatives that go to Congress and are making those decisions to protect us what is absolutely a real threat to our freedom.
True, but those representatives, especially for those who saw the documentary The Swamp, it aired for the first time yesterday.
Oh,
it was kind of disappointing, although it had Republicans and Democrats, and it tried to be not partisan, which was the good part of it, I thought. But the message through the whole 2 hours basically is that all our representatives, they are doing their work at the Capitol, right? And then they cross the street, and there's Democratic House and this Republican House where they're making calls to raise money. And so that's the lobbyists. So they're all working for, or they get money from lobbyists, and so they got to do their job in the Capitol to provide for the lobbyists. So we, the people, even don't have much say. We can call them and they'll pick up the phone and they say, yeah, but who they really respond is not the people anymore, and that's why the swamp has to be drained. They're responding to their lobbyists. So I do see, or the documentary at least said that there's more and more Congress people that are raising money different ways, and they don't want to accept any money from lobbyists anymore, so they can be objective.
What a great word.
Objective.
And I haven't seen it, so I can't comment.
Yeah. But that was kind of what I got from it.
Right.
And that's why it needs to be drained. Not Democrats, not Republicans. All of them are totally puppets on a string, trying to get the money from the lobbyists, and then the lobbyists obviously push the agenda.
And we need to create a system of government central where it's not a millionaire club. One of the other disturbing, and again, I invite the listeners, Google how many millionaires are in the United States Congress and the Senate. Virtually everyone in the Senate is a millionaire. When did we decide that our representatives had to meet that threshold?
That's right.
And then I might also add, I mentioned about lawyers. The lawyers on the one hand can be a force for good in the sense that those lawyers that uncovered the subterfuge that was going on at Monsanto did a tremendous job. How much should they have been paid? To me, the favor that they did to America in letting people know what we've allowed our food to do. The reason why our numbers for this coronavirus are so appalling is that we were sick going into
we got all these other pandemics or epidemics going on
simultaneously.
Yes.
Type 2 diabetes. My heart's broken by the fact that certainly our medical system does really well if you happen to live in Scarsdale, New York, or Beverly Hills in California. That to me is not the America that I want, and that goes back to our community.
Yeah.
And I can only say that our doors are open. I don't care what color you are. I mean, we do pro bono work. It's need. And the understanding that if we don't address all of these other subgroups like the obesity and the diabetes, it doesn't matter what skin color you are on, you've created an environment that puts us at risk and my grandkids at risk.
Oh, sure.
And that's why we're doing this.
We got to get back to optimal health. We got to get our immune systems up, which reduces the risks of any of those things that we're talking about. I mean, it's actually very simple, but this was great because yes, critical thinking. And Mitch, you talked about the internet and Google and those 4 people. But everybody's witnessing it now with their own eyes, because even if you're on Facebook or Twitter or whatever, when you post something, it is fact checked and they delete your posts. And I think everybody that's listening, it happened to them. And so you should ask yourself, why? Why would my information be deleted? Everybody that's listening or is watching your Facebook page, they should have the opportunity to get your opinion or your stance. And then they label it false, and that's the fact checkers. But the fact checkers
Or a quack. You're into quackery.
sure, but then the fact checkers obviously are partisan, or they have their own agenda, right?
Right.
So at least question things, open your eyes, and many things, are surfacing. It's much easier to find now than they were last year.
But I want to preserve the fundamental principle of any medical system. And that is that you can't be forced
Consent.
to do something unless you are willing to have it done. It literally is informed consent. They have you sign a paper that said, so you're going to do a hernia operation, and these are the risks. And you sign the paper because the lawyers are waiting there to make sure that if there's a mistake. Well, why wouldn't it be if you did it for a gallbladder surgery? It's simple and low risk, but you still have to sign it. Oh, yeah, by the way, when I have my gallbladder taken out, I won't be able to digest fats for the rest of my life, but you can't sue the doctor that took your gallbladder.
Yeah.
Right? You signed it, right? That's informed consent.
It's informed consent, but the people sign it, don't read it, and they don't understand what it means to not be able to process omega-3s anymore for the rest of their life, how it affects their diet, how it affects their brain and their health.
And I can only say that is why we're doing what we're doing together, and our next one's going to be even better. It's going to be even better. We're going to do Dr. Peter Ash, who's an oncologist at Shands.
Okay, sure. I mean, always happy.
Dealing with cancer from a nutritional standpoint. What an amazing idea. We
really,
we only knew about that 30 years ago when my wife and I left Connecticut and Yale New Haven Medical Center. Which, all right, well, that's on the agenda. That's
any last words for the listeners?
No,
Mitch?
he
just needed to let it out.
I had to get it out of my chest.
Ahmed did a good job.
Yep.
Because he triggered Mitch. Mitch called me up. Here we are, critical thinking people. There's a lot of things out there. Just don't think for granted. Think twice. Look at the opposite, because there's research that tells, it's white, and other research shows it's black. We all have our self-fulfilled prophecies too. We want to see what we're looking for. And it's very hard to kind of step back and realize, because most of the times we're wrong. Whatever we read and we believe it, most of the times it's wrong. So take that extra step, do some investigation, ask questions. And again, Mitch is a great health advocate in our community.
Stay positive.
Sure.
Don't let the fear and understand. The
negativity. What's positive on TV these days? Negativity.
I had Dr. Bernie Siegel said, these are not ideas that you can't understand if you work at it long enough.
Yeah.
You don't surrender your ability without understanding unless you agree to some other authority.
Give your consent.
But by giving the consent, just like you go and have your car fixed. But it's all about positive problem solving, informed consent, and lots of love. Lots of love. Loving the family, loving your community, and then loving everyone enough to be able to be healthy and not worry about this coronavirus.
That's right. You gotta. I mean, again, that's what health freedom is about. You gotta take your own health in your own hands. You gotta be responsible for your own health. You cannot just rely, on the news, on the doctors, on Dr. Fauci's, speech. It doesn't all matter what they say. You're in control of your body, and you can take that control. Nobody prevents you. And if you need help, there's people like us around everywhere.
Nothing more to say. You got it. Today. Thanks,
all right.
folks.
Always choose health freedom.
That was great.
Good. Let me make sure it's all good.